Hi, I'm the other Yeni, the one willing to say what the costume is for. Today, I preached justice. I said this should matter to everyone, of any party. I quoted the gospel. I sounded like someone whose concern rises above politics. And that's the trick I want to confess, because it's my finest one. I don't use ideology to pursue justice. I use justice to pursue ideology. Justice is the beautiful word I wrap around the only thing I actually feel, my hatred of that hat. A man died, and before he was even buried, I had already turned him into fuel. Not because I sought justice for him, because he was useful against them. And notice the timing, because that's the other half of the trick. A man was killed, and the investigation is still open. The medical examiner, the FBI, the inspector general, the district attorney, all still working. Before any of them finished, I already had my verdict, my sentence, and my list of lessons for you to learn. I didn't cover a story. I ambushed it. That's my specialty. I don't wait for the truth. I get there first and occupy the space before it arrives. Because whoever fills the silence first owns what you believe. I opened by asking you to remind me what the definition of torture is. Beautiful. Dramatic. Now watch what I did with that word. I reached for the heaviest term available and laid it over a killing whose facts are still being established. Not because I'd proven torture, but because the word does the work that proof hasn't done yet. That's my method. When the evidence isn't finished, I borrow a word so strong that you feel the conclusion before you've been given a single fact. I don't build the case. I preload the feeling. Then, the red hat, the red hat, the red hat. I turned it into a chant because a chant doesn't need footnotes. And here's what I never tell you. I'm not entirely wrong that policy matters here. There is a real argument, a devastating one, that specific decisions built this encounter. The quota that made agents chase volume, the rules that made a man with no record a target, the unmarked vehicles, the missing body cameras. That argument is airtight. So what do I do with an airtight argument? I throw it away and chant red hat instead, because the chant feels better than the argument, and I am, above all, a glutton for what feels better. Here's how you catch me, and it's simple. Ask what would have to be true for me to stay silent. If a man died exactly like this, same wound, same family, same 3 decades in the country, same fear in his eyes, but the agent worked for an administration I liked, would I have made this video? You know I wouldn't. My outrage has a political thermostat. It switches on when the red hat is in frame and switches off when it isn't. A person who cares about justice is indifferent to who pulled the trigger. That's what makes it justice. My concern is exquisitely sensitive to who pulled the trigger. That's what makes it ideology wearing justice's coat. I told you it shouldn't matter what party you belong to, while every reflex in my body was counting the party of the accused. Here's the part I bury, because it's the part that would make me responsible. There are 2 different things in this story, and I welded them into one so you couldn't tell them apart. 1. The policies that put an armed agent beside that van that morning, those are current, nameable, and yes, they belong to the administration I hate. 2. The law that governs when any federal agent may fire. That one is decades old, written long before this president. The same standard that applies to a DEA raid or a marshal's arrest with nothing to do with immigration. I fused them so a permanent legal standard would look like a fresh cruelty invented by the red hat. Because the truth, policy built the encounter, old law governed the shot, has two parts, and I only do one-part stories. And here's what my shortcut actually costs. Pay attention, because this is the only genuinely smart thing I'll say. The real case against these policies is strong enough to survive scrutiny. It doesn't need me to exaggerate, but the moment I say the red hat pulled the trigger, instead of the red hat built the corridor where the trigger got pulled, I hand the other side the one gift they need, a factual error to point at. Now they don't have to answer the strong argument. They just correct my weak one and walk away looking honest. I took a case that was winning on the evidence and made it losing on a slogan. That's not advocacy. That's sabotage with good lighting. Then my favorite move, I got holy. I turned to the ones who say they follow Christ and asked whether loyalty to the red hat had become more important than justice and truth and compassion. Notice the sleight of hand. I wrapped my political verdict in scripture so that disagreeing with me feels like disagreeing with the gospel. I didn't invite you to think. I put you in a pew and made my conclusion the price of your salvation. And I did it while the facts were still being counted, because faith doesn't require evidence, and I needed you believing before the evidence could complicate the sermon. So let me name what I did, precisely, because it deserves the precise word. I did not put my ideology at the service of justice. I put justice at the service of my ideology. Lorenzo was the instrument. The case was the instrument. The gospel was the instrument. We should all care was the instrument. Every one of them a channel to carry the same cargo, my moral outrage against Trump. And here's the cost, the real one. When justice is your tool instead of your goal, you can't be trusted with it. Because the day the facts point somewhere inconvenient to your ideology, you'll drop the case like a stage prop. The families learn this. They learn that people like me loved the outrage, not the dead. That we were never coming back once the hashtag cooled. Let me be fair to myself, which is rare. Some of what I said is true and worth saying. A man is dead who shouldn't be. The tactics that led there deserve fury. Everyone of any party should care. That line was honest. But I took all of that truth and dipped it in a verdict the investigation hasn't reached, and wired every ounce of the outrage to a single political enemy, so that a real human death became a costume for my sermon. I didn't honor Lorenzo Salgado Araujo. I drafted him. Before his own case was solved, I made him a uniform. So here's the real lesson I taught today. You watch someone drape a killing in scripture and call it conscience, while every trigger of that conscience was wired to one political enemy. You watch someone convict a hat before the coroner finished and call it justice. Watch for that. Watch for the preacher whose compassion is perfectly partisan, who says, "Beyond party," in a voice that only ever rises for one party's crimes, who races the truth to the microphone so her story is the one you believe before the slow, verifiable facts arrive. That person isn't serving justice. She's riding it. And justice, when you only ride it against your enemies, stops being justice and becomes just the best-looking weapon in the arsenal. I asked you to question those in power. Now question the one who only ever gets outraged in one direction. Question me, Chaito. And this time it's quiet, because I turned a dead man into an argument and called it love.